Let's speak further about this now. Bring in News 24 investigative journalist Jeff Wicks, who's in fact covered Matlala for quite a few months now. Jeff, you've done in your investigative pieces. Let's start with the statement today from Minister Senzo Mkhwanazi, drawing a distance, if you will, not just between himself and Matlala, but also Brown Mkhwanazi. How well has he done, and how does his version in the statement today compare to what is known about this apparent relationship?
Well, thank you for having me, Thembekile. And I think to cut to the chase, there's still a lot of questions that Police Minister Senzo Mkhwanazi needs to answer. And I think the parliamentary inquiry, which we now know will be launched at some stage, will be key to that. You know, the real sting for the minister was his association with Mkhwanazi, because when we consider everything that Mkhwanazi put up on Sunday, there was no real direct link between Matlala and Mkhwanazi. It was just Mkhwanazi saying that he was doing the minister's bidding and acting with his blessing and his behest. We don't know what the other side of that conversation looked like. But I think what damages the minister's probity, or at least the image of his probity, is the way he obfuscated around this comradely or associate relationship when he answered questions before Parliament. And I think that's where the metal is going to meet the meat, because lying before Parliament, of course, is an offence. And I think that's the biggest danger for the sitting minister at this moment. But we know that he's not the only player on the board.
And just on Senzo Mkhwanazi, Jeff, we're hearing all of these allegations, and as you're saying, claims of a relationship, bidding that's been done, possibly using his name, etc. But is there anything from the available information that indicates that perhaps Senzo Mkhwanazi may have a criminal case to answer, or is it limited at this point to a questionable set of friends?
I think it's the latter. To be honest, you know, Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi's press briefing was unprecedented in that it was a broad swipe at not only his political principal, but other high-ranking officers in the service. And we also know that the SAPS is an organization that is perennially riven by faction fighting and struggles for power and control, because when one gets into those positions, you have control of not only the criminal heft and the investigative heft of the South African police force, but you also have controls of budgets. And we've seen, and this is where the Matlala nexus comes in, that procurement is a site of extraction. We've seen it in the public hospital system, we've seen it at Eskom, and the police is no different. They have a track record which proves it.
And you have to then wonder what else is still perhaps hidden, what is untold in this story, especially as people try to piece together whether indeed the likes of the minister did do the bidding of a suspected criminal, be it at a tender level or perhaps helping to conceal some of his other alleged crimes.
Yeah. So we know for a fact that Minister Mkhwanazi did set in motion a process which led to an audit, which led to the ultimate cancellation of Vusi Matlala's tender. And I think what's important timeline context for people to understand is that tender was adjudicated and awarded during the term of Mkhwanazi. And we've managed to place Mkhwanazi in the picture now, because lo and behold, several days after Mkhwanazi's press briefing, we are able to confirm that the former police minister enjoyed the run of Vusi Matlala's penthouse apartment, staying not once but twice. And he was quite resolute when he told me that they were definitely not friends, but they were obviously close enough to share an apartment.
Is there anything to suggest in the former minister's case, Mkhwanazi, that perhaps his stay at this luxury penthouse was, shall we say, a reward, if I can put it in that way, for perhaps helping to facilitate anything in Matlala's favor? Or is it just an interesting fact in the timeline?
I think where we are now, it remains an interesting but guiding fact. You know, what our reportage has spanned several months, and we focused on the award of the tender itself. And we know that the award stinks to high heaven. The police's own auditors have spelled that out in reports which say the award and adjudication process was so beset by irregularity that all of the money paid to Vusi Matlala at this point, which is 50 million rand in 7 months, should be declared as a regular expenditure. And that was obviously the basis upon which they cancelled the tender. And we know that Mkhwanazi played a part in that. What remains to be seen is the results of an IDAC investigation, which is also now focusing on the award of this tender, and all the officers who left their fingerprints in the bid adjudication committee, the specification committee, and such. And so there will be an investigation and there will be outcomes. And it appears to me that IDAC is moving with some modicum of haste.
I want us to move on, Jeff. We've got about 2 minutes left for this conversation, but let's talk about the other revelation today by Correctional Services, confirmation, in fact, that Mkhwanazi was found with a cell phone in his cell at the Mkhwanazi Correctional Center. That then begs the question, how did he get access to a cell phone while in a correctional center? But perhaps most importantly, who he got it from and who he was speaking to.
And we know from the Correctional Services Department that that phone will be forensically imaged, and I'm sure a team of investigators will be pulling that apart by its raw coding data. We know that the issues of contraband in South African prisons is an everyday occurrence. It shouldn't come as a surprise to us that he has a cell phone. But I think what this means for him is it slightly dents his image of a proper, upright businessman who is willing to abide by the law. It certainly doesn't present us with an image of someone who's been wrongly accused, because everyone also knows that the only way you get a cell phone inside prison is through a bribe.
National Police Commissioner Fani Masemola today giving a briefing, updating on generalities, but also being asked about this particular scandal, the development itself. But where does he fit into the puzzle, Jeff? Is he just, from your legwork that you've done on this story in recent months, possibly years at this point, is he just an innocent bystander, a non-aligned bystander in the tug of war between his colleagues and superiors?
Well, unfortunately, Thembekile, he doesn't have the right to be an innocent bystander in this process. You know, the fact that he had one of his provincial commissioners essentially going rogue and painting an image of a fractured SAPS in which Mkhwanazi places Masemola in his camp, that's what he said publicly. That's problematic. I don't think we've seen adequate leadership from this police commissioner, certainly not now. And the dysfunction of the police directly correlates with the rampant crime rate, which all South Africans are tired of. Now we see a further division, which has not only upset the police, but perhaps the entire security and justice cluster in our country.
And is this really just a fight about the soul and the integrity of the police service, or is there something else at play here, Jeff?
Well, I mean, there's always going to be agendas at play. You know, there's power and money on the line. We have to understand that. But truly, I believe that this is the battle for the soul of the SAPS. This is probably the most significant scandal since the days of Jackie Celebi, and we've seen a couple since then. And what this parliamentary inquiry now promises is a public accounting of exactly what happened, and hopefully we can get closer to the truth of what's going on.
Jeff Wicks, always good to talk to you. Jeff is an investigative journalist with News 24.